Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're embarking on a genuinely fascinating journey into human biology. We're going to completely strip away the noise, the internet anecdotes, and the pop culture stereotypes, and just focus purely on the objective science. We're talking the pharmacology and the incredibly intricate biology of how cannabis actually interacts with the human body. So get ready, because you're about to look at your own biology in a completely new way.
So, to kick things off, I want you to think about this question for a second. What do a runner's high, that wave of relief you feel after a super stressful day, and the management of chronic pain all have in common? It kind of sounds like a trick question, right? Well, the answer isn't just a fleeting feeling or a psychological state. The answer is actually a microscopic, highly sophisticated network that is literally running through your body right this very second.
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap for our micro to macro scientific journey today. First, we'll cover the endocannabinoid system. Then, phytocannabinoids, THC versus CBD. Third, achieving biological homeostasis. Fourth, we'll look at the clinical evidence for chronic pain. Fifth, we'll cover nausea, spasticity, and beyond. And finally, number 6, lifestyle and ECS wellness.
All right, part 1, the endocannabinoid system.
What's just wild to me is that despite its massive, absolute importance to our daily health, this internal master regulatory network was only discovered relatively recently, like we're talking the late 1980s and early 90s. By definition, the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS, is a vast biological system made up of neurotransmitters and receptors, and it's present in all mammals, from us humans all the way down to simple animals like sea hydras. Its primary job? To act as the body's master regulator. It is constantly working behind the scenes to maintain physiological homeostasis, which is really just a fancy word for balance. Think of it like a giant lock and key mechanism. Our bodies naturally produce chemical keys known as endocannabinoids, the most famous ones being anandamide and 2-AG. These keys float around and fit perfectly into cellular locks, called receptors, which are stationed all over your body.
And this brilliantly illustrates where those locks are actually located. We essentially have two primary types of receptors. CB1 receptors are heavily concentrated right up in your brain in your central nervous system. They manage the heavy lifting for things like neurological signaling, motor learning, and memory. On the flip side, we have CB2 receptors. These are found mostly out in your peripheral immune cells and tissues. They're the ones on the ground managing your body's immune and inflammatory responses.
Moving on to part 2, phytocannabinoids, THC versus CBD.
So, while endocannabinoids are produced internally by our own bodies, phytocannabinoids are chemical compounds produced externally by the cannabis plant. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this historical data from the DEA. We can actually track the average concentration of THC and CBD in seized cannabis samples over a 2-decade period, right from 1995 to 2014. Notice that upward trend? That's THC, and its potency has steadily and sharply risen over the years. Meanwhile, the data for CBD has remained almost completely flat, just hovering right down near zero. Now, to understand why that potency gap matters, we need to look at how these two very distinct botanical compounds act as external keys in our biological locks. THC is the highly psychoactive compound. It binds directly to those CB1 receptors in the brain we just talked about, which is what actually causes intoxication. CBD, however, is entirely non-intoxicating. It primarily interacts with the CB2 receptors. And in this really fascinating botanical twist, CBD actually acts to modulate and minimize some of THC's unwanted side effects, things like rapid heart rate and heavy sedation.
Let's hit part 3, achieving biological homeostasis.
Let's move to and see how this builds, pivoting from the molecular level to see how this system actively regulates your day-to-day well-being. Imagine you encounter a really stressful event. Here's exactly what happens. Step 1. You face that stressor. Step 2, your endocannabinoid system immediately activates. Your levels of anandamide actually drop, which alerts your whole body to the threat, while your levels of 2-AG rapidly rise. Step 3, that rising 2-AG essentially taps your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis on the shoulder. That's your body's main stress response system. The 2-AG signals it to calm down, terminating the stress response and helping you return to a state of calm balance. It's an incredible built-in buffer.
But what happens when this system gets exhausted or depleted? Science points to a condition called clinical endocannabinoid deficiency, or CED. This is a pathophysiological state where a prolonged deficiency or alteration in how your ECS functions is actually linked to chronic conditions. Researchers have tied CED to debilitating ailments like migraines, post-traumatic stress disorder, and inflammatory bowel disease. It strongly suggests that without enough of these natural chemical keys, our bodies simply cannot find their way back to baseline.
Which brings us to Part 4, clinical evidence regarding chronic pain. Moving from microscopic biology out into real-world clinical proof, take a look at this incredibly striking statistic: 64%. In a recent cross-sectional survey of medical cannabis patients in Michigan, researchers found that the use of medical cannabis was associated with a 64% reduction in conventional opioid use. I mean, that is a massive, real-world shift in how patients are managing their daily pain. And you know, the broader data completely supports this trend. A major systematic review of 28 randomized trials evaluated the exact effects of plant-derived cannabinoids on chronic pain. The pooled analysis showed that patients using these cannabinoids saw an approximately 40% increase in the odds of experiencing significant pain improvement, especially when compared to control conditions.
So how exactly is it pulling this off? The biological mechanisms of action are actually very clear. Cannabinoids alter the transmission of pain signals by actively reducing the production of inflammatory cytokines and inhibiting inflammation-related enzymes. They even go as far as to induce apoptosis, which is just programmed cell death, in excessive inflammatory cells. Essentially, these compounds are going right to the synaptic cleft in your nervous system to intercept and rewrite those pain signals before they can ever overwhelm your brain.
All right, Part 5, nausea, spasticity, and beyond.
So the crucial point is that we absolutely must look objectively at what the data actually proves versus what still needs a lot more research. According to comprehensive health reports, there is conclusive, substantial evidence that oral cannabinoids are effective for things like chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, as well as for improving patient-reported spasticity symptoms in multiple sclerosis. However, and this is key, for conditions like glaucoma, dementia, and traumatic brain injury, the current scientific evidence is simply inadequate to make a definitive clinical recommendation. We just need much more research in those specific areas.
And finally, Part 6, Lifestyle and ECS Wellness.
Here's the really cool part. You don't necessarily need plant interventions to optimize this system. Everyday healthy lifestyle choices actively nourish your ECS. Moderate aerobic exercise is a huge one. Remember that runner's high we mentioned at the very beginning of the explainer? Research shows it's actually driven by exercise-induced endocannabinoid signaling, not just endorphins. Plus, adding dietary omega-3 fatty acids, using stress management techniques like yoga or osteopathic massage, and keeping a healthy gut fueled by pre- and probiotics. All of this helps keep your cellular locks and keys functioning perfectly.
Oh, and I have to share this really surprising, tasteful fact to add to your biological toolkit. Cannabis is not the only plant that interacts with your ECS. Beta-caryophyllene is a natural terpene found in common dietary spices, things you probably have in your kitchen right now, like black pepper and cloves. When you consume it, it actually exerts anti-inflammatory effects by directly activating your immune-regulating CB2 receptors. So yeah, you are likely interacting with your endocannabinoid system right at the dinner table without even realizing it.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound thought to wrap up this explainer. If our bodies are biologically hardwired with an intricate system that is entirely designed to seek physiological balance, how will fully unlocking the secrets of the endocannabinoid system reshape the very future of medicine? It's a massive question, and researchers are working tirelessly right now to answer it. And honestly, it promises to change how we view human health forever. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this science today, and whatever you do, keep your curiosity about the human body alive.